We read the Christmas story. It is in Luke chapter 2, and starting in verse 4, it says this. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, and the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Year after year, we come and we hear the story of a long-awaited Messiah. The story of a baby being born. A story that for some of us feels so far away from the reality of our life that it becomes the hour of endurance and sacrifice to sit through. See, here's what I know is I know that many of you were promised a really great meal after this. And I hope it's really good. And I know there are others of you that you're here because you're just looking to impress the in-laws. And I hope that works. And some of you are honoring your parents. Keep doing that. And then there's others, kids of all ages. There's something about receiving gifts. And so maybe you're here and you're just anticipating a few more hours until it's time to unwrap some gifts. So whatever it takes to get through, you will sit through until it's time to open those presents. But what if? What if this year, the Christmas story, whether you've heard it many, many times before, or today maybe you're hearing it for the first time and you're not quite sure how all the details fit together, but what if this year the Christmas story is different? What if it actually changes your story? See, the difference between this being just a story that you hear every year to being your story is you. It's as simple as that. Like, you get to choose tonight if this is just another year of endurance or if this year the same story becomes a different story for you. The Christmas story is sometimes hard to believe, isn't it? And I think one of the reasons that it's so hard to believe is that the reality of our life and the darkness that's in our world. And I'm going to get real quick. It's the darkness that we experience across our nation, across our world, that countries are at war, that things like sex trafficking continues to increase, that more murders are committed because of hate, because there seems to be like political agendas that just rule our society. And at times it can feel like it's more dark than it is hopeful. It's the darkness in our personal lives, right? It's the lies and the cheating and the deceit. It's the abuse, it's the bitterness. It's the control, it's the pride, it's the perfectionism, it's the selfishness. That as we continue to live our life, that sometimes those things of darkness can just get a hold of us. I mean, darkness can even look like any parent who is looking to find the level up chair as a Christmas present and then it gets sold out somewhere. And you're running around trying to find it. Dark day if you can't find the gift that your kid is looking for. Or the darkness that millions felt across the world when they were waiting in the queue for concert tickets to Taylor Swift. And it was such a dark day when they spent hours and hours waiting only to find out you actually didn't get a ticket. Super dark day, huh? Darkness comes in all shapes, all forms. But the reason the Christmas story sometimes is so hard to believe is because of the darkness in our world and the darkness in our personal life. And so I want to share a couple stories of a couple people that have been a part of Prairie Heights. And the first one I want to share is Marisa's story. And here's part of Marisa's story is she grew up and she was dedicated in her faith and made a lot of faith decisions as a kid. And then she went off to college, and here's her story. Here's what she said. She said, I started drinking and partying and other things, and I still claimed I was a Christian, but I wasn't living it. That left me feeling painfully lonely, a lack of belonging, and broken on the inside. No matter what I did, I always felt empty. She goes on to say, no matter how much fun I had the night before, I would wake up feeling empty. And then she explains in her story, when COVID hit, many of us were at home, and part of her journey was she finished up college at home, and she was able to work from home. And so that quiet time on her own, she actually drew nearer to God, and she felt like God was kind of calling her back into relationship with him. And that's when she reached out and she found a church home here at Prairie Heights and began getting connected. And she shares that at the time that she got connected to people, that her faith was stronger than ever. She says, I decided to quit drinking. I rededicated my purity to Christ, and I'm going to wait for marriage. My friend group has changed significantly. And even, she explains though, even after recommitting her life to Christ, that she just had some days where mentally she was just in a dark spot, where she was feeling like, what is my life's purpose? Do I have a life's purpose? And as she remembered her commitment to Jesus, she just felt like God was coming alongside her and reminding her that her life has meaning and purpose. And as I think about the details of Marisa's story, if I was to tell you many of the details of my own story, I can relate with Marisa. And what she found out, and what I know I found out, is that when we go after all these things to try to satisfy a need in us, that is a need and a place that only Jesus can fill, that there is nothing that can satisfy the thing that only Jesus can. And so she realized her need for Jesus again. And I love that she is a young woman who is on fire for what Jesus is doing in her life. I want to tell you Russ's story. Russ has been a part of Prairie Heights for quite a while, and just recently, over the past several months, had a medical emergency. And as he was being rushed to the hospital and into immediate surgery, it was truly a life or death circumstance. It became very dire very quickly. And his family reached out to church family and friends and relationships he had built over many years. And so by the time Russ went into surgery, there was a group of men who were in the lobby of the hospital who were praying on Russ's behalf, who were praying to God saying, hey, God, would you meet our friend? Would you help the doctors and nurses? And they were praying passionately for their friend Russ that he would make it through. There were many pastors who went to visit to pray for him before he went into surgery. And when we asked him afterwards, what was it like for him? He was obviously in and out. And he did share, he said, as my mom told me that there were the men and my friends and my brothers were in the lobby praying, he said, I just felt this overwhelming sense of hope, this overwhelming sense of peace that Jesus was going to take care of me, that he was going to get me through this. And in a really dark, dark moment, Russ pulled through. And then I think it was about a week ago, he came to a Prairie Heights gathering. And if you know Russ, he's quieter. He doesn't have a whole lot of words. It takes a lot to get too many words out of him. Like, you got to ask a bunch of questions to get a lot of words out of him. And such a kind man. As he came to this gathering, all of a sudden, they were telling me that he was talkative and he was excited. And he kept talking and he kept sharing. And they said, we just saw more joy and life out of Russ. And I want to tell you that medical emergency led to his leg being amputated. So, I mean, his life is changing right now. And he showed up in a wheelchair, happier than ever. Because of Jesus and because of the community that he has that is now caring for him and helping see him through a really dark moment. Isn't that incredible? I'm so thankful that Russ has people that he can turn to. And what I love about Russ's story is that it's a reminder of our need for Jesus and that it doesn't stop the moment we place our faith and trust in Jesus. That no matter how long we've been walking with Jesus, we need to remember our need for him so we can find hope in dark days. And the other thing that's just so true, right, is that life is hard. We're going to have ups and downs in this life, and that's why we need Jesus, and that's why we need other people. And so if I sat across the table from you and I started to ask questions and learn more about your story, I'm sure that for you and I, and we would find out that like the intricate little small details would probably be different, but I think we would also find out that you and I have a whole lot more in common than what we don't. Because here's the truth. Our stories are all different, but our need for the Christmas story is all the same. Our need for the Christmas story is all the same. In John 3:19-21, it says this: "This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people love darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God." In that first verse, in verse 19, it says this is the verdict. Light has come into the world. Jesus has come into the world to bring light, to bring life. But people love darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. There's a lot of truth to that statement. Friends, you and I, we can fall in love with darkness. We can fall in love with some of the sin in our life. A couple of examples, like, sometimes it's a lot easier to talk about people behind their back and then to kind of rally other people to start talking about that person because it feels way better to not be in the dark alone, right? But to bring other people with us and to be in the dark together. And so gossip, it's so much easier to gossip than it is to have a really hard, uncomfortable conversation face to face with somebody. That's a simple, everyday example of what darkness actually, we actually kind of fall in love with darkness because there's something about it, and we definitely don't want to experience darkness alone, so we'll bring other people. Another form of darkness is simple selfishness. And I don't know about you, I'm married. My husband and I celebrated 11 years just last week of marriage, and I'll tell you, there are way more days of our marriage that it's been easier for me to think of self than it is for me to think of him. There are many more days that it's easier for me to say, this is what I need, than for me to say, hey, what do you need? And so what does that look like? I don't know what gets a hold of you right now or tonight, if there's anything coming to mind that might draw you into darkness. We love escaping reality. We love escaping reality, like binge watching anything. They can just suck you in, and then they leave you hanging, so you cannot stop at the end of an episode. You have to go to the next one. You know a trick I've learned? Stop midway through the episode. Because then it's like, okay, I'm not going to get caught into this. I won't keep going. But there's something about that, right? Like, what draws us into that? What draws us into consistently, constantly being entertained? if we pause and step back, what draws us into that is it allows us to escape from reality at times. It's not all bad, but when we get really sucked into it, it allows us to maybe escape the things that are the very things that we need to look at and we need to address. Maybe some of the darkness in our life we choose just because we can, right? Just because we have the free will to choose the darkness. Because let's be honest, most sin is really fun in the moment. Most sin feels really good in the moment. I was sitting with a friend just last week, and as we were kind of reading through some of the scripture, even for this message, one of the things that hit her, and tears started going down her face, is as she was thinking about this idea of being in darkness and this idea of Jesus coming, like the Christmas story and Jesus coming to be the light. She started to think about her story, and she retold me. I've been friends with her for years. I know many of the details of her story. But as we sat there, she explained how she said, at first, when we started to engage in drugs and alcohol, it was just to find some joy and some peace in just these moments. And at first, there was a lot of fun with it. And then she said, all of a sudden, what seemed like all of a sudden, they were wrapped up in a deep addiction. And both her and her husband ended up selling their wedding rings so they could afford and they could buy the next drug. Wrapped up in addiction. And as I sat there with her and tears are streaming down her face as she thought about, as she's retelling her story, and she said, about that time is when I was invited to come to Prairie Heights. And about that time, I accepted Jesus into my life. And tears are flowing down her face as she's thinking about the light that came into such a dark moment of her life. And how God took her life and literally just flipped it upside down and gave her hope and is giving her healing. But the one thing is, her and I kind of chatted about it for a little bit. The one thing that stood out to both of us is, hey, we got to let people know, and we got to remember for ourselves, it's a red flag in our lives if we have to go to something else to find peace, to find joy, to find fulfillment. If we have to go to something like a substance, or if we have to go to someone that isn't Jesus for fulfillment, for joy in our life, that's a red flag that we're entering a danger zone of our life. And maybe some of you came tonight and the darkness is so deep for you. I want you to know that you can make a life-changing decision tonight to change course, to do something different. And here's the truth, is that for any of us on the way to different, you know what comes into play? Fear. Fear of if I told anybody that this is what's going on in my life, they wouldn't love me anymore. If I told anybody the darkness of my thoughts or the darkness of what happens that nobody knows about, they aren't going to accept me in their life anymore. And that fear, do you know what it does? It stops us in our tracks and it keeps us where we're at. It keeps us lonely. It keeps us in hiding. It keeps us afraid. And I want you to know that you don't have to live like that anymore. You don't have to live like that anymore. You don't have to live in hiding. You don't have to live in fear. You don't have to live in complete darkness with feelings of no hope. You can actually experience freedom. You can experience life. And when I say freedom, freedom on the inside, a freedom that says you can stop trying to pull up the bootstraps and you don't have to try harder. You don't have to do better. That's not the Christmas story. There is no amount of deeds or things you could do to earn a love for God. Here's the beauty. He knows your story. He knows everything about you. and he loves you so, so much. So there's freedom that can be found as you think about maybe where you might be tonight in some darkness. You know, we read a couple of verses a little bit ago, and it's light is defined as life. That Jesus came to bring life into a dying world. Jesus came to bring life into your dying world. Whatever might be like dead or broken, he came to bring life to. He came to bring restoration. He came to bring hope and healing into the very places of your life that you think are dead and gone, or dead and hanging out where they don't need to be. Jesus came to revitalize all that and to bring life to you. See, Jesus wants you and I to experience a full life that even through the dark moments, even through the dark days, that he's going to shine in and through us. You know, it makes me think about like kids at bedtime. If you're a parent or a grandparent, or you have nieces or nephews, and you think about when they're younger. I've got a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, and so bedtime and bedtime routines, and I don't know what yours looks like. Ours looks like a whole lot of repeating right now of like, go brush your teeth, go brush your teeth. How many times do I have to tell you to go brush your teeth? Am I alone in that? Okay, good. I'm glad. That makes me feel better. Makes me feel better. So after all that, and they get their teeth brushed, and they get their pajamas on, our routine looks like each kid goes into their room, and each of us go into one of the rooms, and we read 2 books, and then we pray with our kids, and then we turn out the light. But it doesn't go completely dark in each of their rooms, because each of their rooms has a night light. And even though they're in the dark, there's a little light that shines. And why is that there? That's there to bring them comfort. It's there to bring them peace. It's there so that as they close their eyes and they get ready to go to sleep for the night, they aren't afraid. And they know that if they were to open their eyes again, even though they're in a dark room, there's a little bit of a light that's still shining. That's what Jesus wants to do for you. Is he wants to be that light that keeps shining. Even when it's dark, he wants to be the light of your life. And he wants to give you hope in a place where you maybe have thought it's hopeless. So you can make a decision tonight to turn from some of the darkness in your life. You can make a decision to release some of the darkness in your life. You can make a decision to honor and to actually bring to the surface some of the darkness, get out of hiding tonight. You can make that decision, and you can invite Jesus to be the light in our life, in your life. See, the Christmas story isn't about being a morally good person. I'm going to say that again. The Christmas story isn't about being a morally good person. Following Jesus isn't about willing your way to doing what's right instead of what's wrong. See, the Christmas story is a rescue plan for the human heart. The Christmas story is a rescue plan for the human heart, for your heart. He came to rescue you. He didn't come to give you a bunch of rules. See, if it was all about just rules of do's and don'ts, do this and don't do that, and then if you do all these things, then you'll get to heaven. I want to, and you just, when you wake up in the morning, you check box as you reflect the day before, and as you go to bed, you think, oh, how was my day? And you check mark, did I do all the things I was supposed to do according to the religious law and all the things of religion? If that was the case, we wouldn't need Jesus. That's not the case. That's why we need Jesus. Jesus came so that you and I could have life, so that we could be filled with his truth and we could be filled with his grace. That he could meet us right in the middle of that. And the rescue plan for our heart is to connect us with God again in relationship with him. And through Jesus and his sacrifice, we can once again be in relationship with God. And that is a beautiful thing. Jesus wasn't just the light of the world. He came to be the light of your world. This isn't just a story that happened thousands of years ago. This is a story that can impact your story tonight. Jesus wasn't just the light of the world. He came to be the light of your world. In John 1:9-13, it says this, the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. See, Jesus came as a fulfillment to the promise through Abraham, the promise through David. He came to fulfill those promises, and the generations of people that he came to fulfill all those promises to, they didn't recognize him when he came. They didn't recognize him, but those who did, those who believed in Jesus and believed that he was who he said he was, he gave the right to become children of God. Who is Jesus? Jesus is the Son of God. He came born as a baby, as fully human and fully God. And then as he grew and became an adult, he began this ministry. And the kind of ministry that he did was nothing that the culture had seen before. He loved people like they hadn't seen before. He served people in ways that they had never experienced before. And then Jesus died a death on a cross that you and I deserve. And then he rose again. And one of the best parts of the story is he said he was going to do all that, and then he did it. And there were eyewitness accounts of people who were there who saw it happen and then told the world about it. And that's why we celebrate the Christmas story tonight. This isn't just a story from the storybook. This isn't just a story of 2,000 years ago. This is a story that can dramatically impact your story tonight. Those who believed were given a new family. See, God loved you so much that he sent his one and only Son, Jesus, to bring you life, to bring you freedom, to bring you light. The Christmas story isn't just a story about a baby being born. It's a story about rescuing the human heart. And tonight, you can receive that story. You can place your full trust, your full faith in Jesus tonight. And by making that decision, what you're saying is you're admitting that you've been living apart from Jesus. That you believe that Jesus is who he said he was. And that you want to live your life committed to him from this day forward. That you don't want to live in hiding anymore. That you don't want to try to will your way through this life. But you want to invite Jesus to be the light of your life. And so John 1:12 says, yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. And that's a decision that you can make tonight. There's a card on your chair if you came here in person. You can go ahead and grab a piece of paper if you're watching online or head to the chat. And I want all of you to grab that now. And in just a moment, we're going to go into a time of reflection. And I would just invite you, like this is a time to not only reflect, but also to receive. And I would just invite you as you think about writing something down on this card. One of the prompts is, today I want to release this darkness. And there just might be something that is keeping you away or keeping you distant from your walk with Jesus. There might be something that is just kind of standing in the way, or something that, honestly, one of the reasons we really want you to write it down is when we're living in darkness, when we can write it down, that is a way to release it, to bring it into the light, to take away the power that it has when we sit in it alone. And so I just want to invite you, as you have this time of reflection and receiving when we sing a song in just a moment, that if something prompts you, that you just write that on that card. And today, if you're placing your faith and trust in Jesus for the first time tonight, and we would love to encourage you on your journey, and so we just invite you to check mark that box as a way to indicate that you're taking a step of faith. You're inviting Jesus to be the light of your life. I'm going to come back up after this song, and here's what I want you, as you receive and as you reflect, I just want you to know that this year, the Christmas story can be your story. There is nothing that can separate you from the love of God, the love that he has for you as his child. And so I'm going to say a prayer as we enter into this time. You can go ahead and close your eyes. I'm going to keep my eyes open. God, I pray for every single human heart here right now, every human heart listening online. I pray that you meet them right in the midst of their story. God, there are details of their story that only you know, that maybe only they know. And God, would you meet them right there in the middle, right there. Would you give them peace, and would you give them your presence? Would you wrap them up in a whole lot of love? Would you fill them with your grace? And would you just help them to know that you are near and you are close? God, we trust you with this time, and we give it all to you. We pray all this in your name. Amen.